The wilderness had witnessed countless blasphemies across its scarred expanse. Blood rituals beneath the Chaos Temple, demon summonings at the Fountain of Rune, the screams of adventurers torn apart by revenants who knew neither mercy nor memory. But on this night, as the aurora borealis twisted into unnatural geometries above the crater's heart, the very substrate of Gielinor's reality began to scream. The Zamorakian cultists had miscalculated. The ritual circle, etched in volcanic ash and powdered dragon bones, was meant to channel raw chaotic essence through 17 blood runes, arranged in the Elder Futhar configuration. Instead, the energies inverted, collapsing inward rather than expanding outward. The lead magister barely had time to register their wrongness before the sky itself tore open. For it was not a portal. Portals obeyed the laws of teleportation magic, the carefully balanced matrices taught in the wizard's tower. This was a wound, a metaphysical laceration that bled impossible light. Reality folded backward, revealing a darkness behind the darkness, and from that void fell a figure wreathed in divine embers that should not exist in this dimension. Kratos struck the obsidian ground with the force of a collapsing star. The impact crater expanded outward in concentric rings, each wave of force pulverizing the black rock into crystalline dust. The blaze of chaos, chains screaming as they unwound, carved deep molten scars into the earth, the metal so hot it turned stone to glass in spiraling patterns. Steam erupted from his skin as if his very flesh burned with borrowed divinity, the kind that Sardomin's priest claimed only the gods themselves could channel without obliteration. He rose slowly, each movement deliberate, ancient. His eyes swept across the alien landscape, the twisted spires of the Chaos Temple in the distance, the skeletal remains of forgotten wars littering the crater, the roar now beating crimson and gold above him. The cultists stood frozen, their incantations dying in their throats. Kratos' voice emerged as a low rasp, carrying across the wilderness with unnatural clarity, as if the wind itself dared not interrupt. I've walked too far, yet the gods remain. The ground answered. A tremor rippled outward from the crater, not the localized shake of an earthquake, but a fundamental vibration that traveled through the ley lines connecting every corner of Gielinor. In Lumbridge, the Duke's crystal chandelier swayed. In Varrock Palace, ancient texts fell from their shelves. In the Wizard's Tower, every scrying orb simultaneously cracked. The Grand Exchange's price tickers froze mid-transaction. The wilderness creatures, greater demons, chaos elementals, revenants bound to their eternal patrol, scattered. These were beings born of pure malevolence, entities that feasted on fear and knew no concept of retreat. Yet they fled, their instinctual recognition of apex predation overriding centuries of cursed existence. Even the skeletal wyverns that circled the northern wastes banged sharply southward, their death rattle cries echoing confusion. In the Edgeville Monastery, Brother Althoric's prayer beat shattered spontaneously, each wooden sphere splitting along invisible fault lines. The protection from melee enchantment woven into the building's foundation flickered, its divine matrix destabilizing for reasons the monks could not comprehend. Ancient artifacts, locked in the Varrock Museum's deepest vault, began to resonate, the Zoroth Godsword humming a frequency that made researchers' teeth ache, the Staff of Armadale pulsing with light it hadn't shown since the God Wars. The air itself transformed. Magic users across Gielinor reported the same phenomenon, a presence in the atmosphere, thick and suffocating, that resisted categorization. It was not the chaotic energy of Zamorak, nor the ordered light of Saradomin. It was not the ancient stillness of Guthix's balance, nor the cold hunger of Zarathus's shadow. The lunar mages on Lunar Isle, who prided themselves on detecting dimensional disturbances, found their instruments useless. The readings oscillated between absolute zero and infinite magnitude. The energy was untranslatable. Rune essence, the fundamental building block of Gielinor's magic system, recoiled from it. Prayer points, the divine connection between mortal and God, flickered in practitioners who faced the wilderness. The Void Knights, who existed at the intersection of order and nothingness, felt their carefully maintained psychic equilibrium shudder. In the crater, Kratos stood motionless, the base of chaos dripping molten stone. The cultists finally broke their paralysis and ran, abandoning their ritual components, their carefully hoarded supplies of pure essence and ancient staffs. One stumbled, turning back to look at the intruder. Kratos met his gaze with eyes that had witnessed the death of pantheons, the collapse of cosmic order, the futility of godhood itself. The cultist's sanity fractured cleanly, and he began to laugh. A sound that would echo in the nightmares of those who later found his body, catatonic but breathing, outside the Edgeful Bank. The ghost of Kratos, the God-Slayer, the ender of Olympus, had arrived in Gielinor. In somewhere in Falador's White Knight headquarters, an emergency bell began to ring. 3 measured tolls, followed by silence. The ancient signal that meant only one thing. An extinction-level threat had manifested in the world. The emergency protocols enacted across Gielinor followed predictable patterns, shaped by millennia of combating threats that fit within established taxonomies. The White Knights mobilized their fastest riders. The Vard Palace Guard deployed their elite reindeer units. The Lumbridge Scouts, fresh from training exercises against hill giants and hobgoblins, were dispatched with standard-issued rune equipment and confidence born of inexperience. Their operational briefing classified the wilderness anomaly as a chaotic avatar manifestation, likely a demon lord summoned through Zamorakian incompetence, or perhaps a corrupted Majorat attempting Paynar breach. The tactical response matrix was clear. Establish perimeter, assess threat level using combat calculator protocols, deploy appropriate prayer protections, engaged with combined martial and magical assault. Commander Denolf of the Berthorpe Imperial Guard led the first investigative force. 12 knights in full rune-plate armor, 3 rangers equipped with magic longbows and dragonstone-tipped arrows, 2 mages carrying ancient staffs charged with blood barrage runes. They crossed the wilderness ditch at dawn, their protection from melee players humming with Saradomin's blessing, to protect item enchantments securing their most valuable equipment against the wilderness's inherent dangers. They found Kratos 3 kilometers north of the crater, walking with the measured pace of inevitability itself. Denolf raised its hand, signaling halt. Standard protocol: attempt diplomatic contact, assess linguistic capacity, determine alignment on the Chaos Order spectrum. His voice carried across the scorched earth with practiced authority. By the decree of King Rold III, and the authority vested in the Misthalin Ascarnia alliance, you are commanded to identify yourself and submit to questioning regarding the dimension of breach originating at. Kratos did not slow, did not acknowledge. His eyes remained fixed on some distant point beyond the horizon, as if the knights were merely obstacles in his path, no more significant than the scattered bones and rusted weapons littering the wilderness. The lead ranger, a veteran of the God Wars dungeon campaigns, notched an arrow. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but for the inexplicable wrongness radiating from the approaching figure. The arrow was tipped with dragon scale, blessed by Saradomin's own priests, enchanted to pierce the hide of greater demons. It had never failed. He loosed. The arrow disintegrated 3 meters from Kratos' chest, not defected, but unmade. The enchantment collapsing, the blessed materials reverting to base components, the wooden shaft turning to ash mid-flight. The ranger stared at his bow as if it had betrayed him. Denolf's tactical assessment shifted. His hand moved to the rune pouch at his belt, fingers finding the familiar shapes of law and nature runes. Whatever this entity was, it possessed defensive capabilities beyond standard demon classification. He began the incantation for Entangle, preparing to root the target in place while his mages repaired defensive. Kratos moved. There was no acceleration, no visible preparation. One moment he walked, the next he was among them, The blaze of chaos screamed through air that should have been protected by divine wards, enhanced by plate armor blessed in the monastery, shielded by prayers that had endured since the Third Age. None of it mattered. The first knight died before understanding he was under attack, the chain blade carved through his rune plate as if it were leather, through the protection from Medipreia as if it were a child's wish, to the very concept of divine protection itself. His body separated along a diagonal line so clean that for a heartbeat he remained standing, his last thought a prayer to Saradomin that died and finished. The second swing claimed 3 more, a ranger attempting to leap backward, a mage raising a defensive earthwave, a knight whose protect from magic prayer should have made him invulnerable to supernatural assault. The blaze of chaos did not discriminate between flesh and magic, between steel and spirit. They simply ended. Denel's entangle spell completed. Green vines of pure magical energy erupted from the ground to seize Kratos' legs. For a fraction of a second, they held. Then they withered. Not burned, but negated. Their fundamental magical structure rejecting contact with something that existed outside Gielinor's metaphysical framework. The nature runes in Denel's pouch cracked audibly. A knight charged with the Saradomin Godsword, one of the most powerful weapons in Gielinor, capable of channeling divine fury into physical form. Its special attack could restore health and prayer points by literally manifesting Saradomin's grace. He activated it mid-swing, blue light cascading down the blade. Kratos caught the sword barehanded. The divine energy should have seared his flesh, should have rejected mortal contact. Instead, it simply stopped. The blue light flickered, dimmed, and extinguished. The knight stared in comprehension as Kratos yanked the blade forward, pulling the knight off balance, and drove the Leviathan axe, materialized from nowhere, through his chest. The knight's final expression was not pain, but theological confusion. The massacre lasted 47 seconds. When it ended, 12 knights lay scattered across scorched earth. Their rune armor twisted and melted, their blessed weapons shattered or corrupted. The mages had managed a single collective ice barrage, flash freezing the ground in a desperate attempt to stow their attacker. Kratos had walked through the magical ice without acknowledging its existence, leaving footprints of molten glass. One ranger survived, only because Kratos walked past him. The man sat paralyzed, his dragonstone arrows scattered, his prayer points completely drained despite not activating any protective prayers. Later, when questioned by Saradomin's inquisitors, he would describe the sensation of being ignored. He looked through me, not at me, through me, as if I was already dead or never alive, or existed in a category his mind simply refused to process. The surviving scouts who witnessed the engagement from the southern ridge retreated immediately, abandoning protocol. They ran until their stamina drained, drank stamina potions with shaking hands, and ran again. The report to Varric Palace was fragmented, contradictory, and unanimous at one point. The defensive systems do not work. Prayer does not work. The weapons do not work. He is not a demon. He is not a god. He is something for which we have no classification. 3 hours after the massacre, a PKer clan stumbled upon a scene while conducting their routine wilderness patrol. These were hardened killers. Players who thrived on ambush tactics and exploitation of game mechanics. They found Kratos standing motionless among the corpses, apparently waiting for something. Their leader, a veteran with max combat stats and a Zamorakian godsword, assessed the situation with a cold calculation of someone who viewed Gielinor through pure numerical optimization. The figure wore no armor, carried weapons of unknown origin, displayed no combat level. In PK logic, this meant one thing: an easy target. He activated Protect from melee, drank a super combat potion for enhanced stats, and equipped his Ring of Recoil, a standard combination that made him nearly invincible against single opponents. His clan flanked outward, preparing Telebelk runes to prevent escape. Kratos turned to face them. The clan leader swung the Zamorakian Godsword, its special attack draining prayer points and dealing massive damage on contact. The blade, forged from the essence of chaos itself, embodied Zamorak's fundamental principle: strength through destruction. It struck Kratos' shoulder and shattered. Not bent, not deflected, shattered. The blade fragmenting into pieces that dissolved before hitting the ground, the hilt cracking along its possible angles, the Zamorakian essence screaming as it was forced to expel from reality. The ring of recoil, designed to reflect damage back to attackers, exploded on a clan leader's finger, taking 3 fingers with it. The clan scattered. Kratos pursued the leader with the inevitability of entropy, the man through a teleblock, preventing magical escape. The runes burned uselessly, unable to establish their matrix on a target that existed perpendicular to Gielinor's magical framework. He drank a Sardoman brew in desperation, the most powerful healing potion available, blessed by the god of order himself. Kratos' hand closed around his throat, lifting him effortlessly. The clan leader's protection prayer flickered and died. His prayer points, 150, fully charged, drained to 0 in 3 seconds. Not consumed, but negated, as if the divine connection itself had been severed. Your gods, Kratos' voice was barely a whisper, mean nothing. He dropped the body. The clan leader lay gasping, live, but fundamentally broken. His prayer book, a sacred text that survived the god wars, that contained enchantments woven by Saradomin's own priests, smoldered in his inventory, its pages blackening despite no flame touching it. 200 kilometers away, in a tower overlooking Draenor village, the wise old man felt the disturbance through his divination crystal. He had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, had catalogued threats from the Calphite Queen to the corporeal beast. His crystal could analyze magical signatures with precision that bordered on precognition. But the readings made no sense. The energy signature was neither chaotic nor ordered. It was not divine, demonic, draconic, or even elemental. It existed in a category the crystal's 1,000-year-old classification system cannot process. The readings oscillated widely, sometimes appearing as pure void, sometimes as concentrated anti-divinity, sometimes as something that registered as negative existence. The wise old man closed his eyes, extending his consciousness through the ley lines, feeding the disturbance's shape. When he opened them again, his hands trembled, the first time in 70 years. He spoke to this empty tower, his voice carrying a weight of absolute certainty. It is not Zarathus's energy, nor Guthix's balance. It is alien wrath, a rejection so fundamental that reality itself bends around it. He does not wield power. He wields refusal, the metaphysical capacity to say no to the fundamental laws we thought were absolute. He paused, staring at the northern horizon, where the wilderness burned with unnatural light. And if the gods have noticed him, they are afraid. The emergency convocation occurred in a location that technically did not exist on any map of Gielinor, the Convergence Chamber. Built during the Third Age, when the gods still walked among mortals, and their followers required neutral ground for negotiation. It sat at a precise metaphysical intersection of Saradomin's order, Zamorak's chaos, and Guthix's balance, held in a permanent stasis by enchantments that predated the modern understanding of magic. Representatives from 3 factions materialized through separate portals, each entrance ritual reflecting their cosmic allegiance. The Saradominus delegation arrived in cascading blue light, their every movement calculated to project divine authority. The Zoroastrian Majorat coalesced from purple shadow, their ancient forms barely contained within humanoid shape. The Void Knights stepped through tears in reality itself, their presence marked by the absence of presence, walking contradictions wrapped in black armor. High Priest Aenosig Reisfer of the Saradominus Church spoke first, his voice carrying the rehearsed certainty of someone whose worldview had never truly been challenged. We are witnessing a divine test. Saradomin has sent this anomaly to separate the faithful from the weak, to prove that order can withstand even the most extreme chaos. The creature's resistance to prayer is merely a refinement of our understanding. We have been complacent in our devotion, and now we must evolve our... It killed 17 temple knights in Falador's courtyard this morning. The interruption came from Commander Karasi of the Temple Knights, her voice stripped of all diplomatic pretense. Not fought, not defeated, killed. Men and women who had survived encounters with tormented demons, who bore Saradomin's personal blessing, who had prayer points enhanced by divine intervention. He walked through the blessed silver sickle enchantments like they were decorative. The protection prayers didn't fail, they simply ceased to exist in his presence. She placed a shattered fragment on the obsidian table, the remains of a Saradomin sword, one of only 12 in existence, forged from Saradomin's own divine essence during the God Wars. The metal had been corrupted at a molecular level, twisted into shapes that hurt to perceive, as if the weapon itself had been forced to comprehend something incompatible with its fundamental nature. This is what remains when holy artifacts encounter him, not destroyed by superior force, but unmade by conceptual rejection. Akthanikos, the Majorat, who had witnessed the rise and fall of Zaros's empire, leaned forward. His voice carried the weight of millennia. The Zarosian archives contain references to beings beyond the elder gods, entities that existed before the current cosmological structure was implemented. We theorize this creature is a remnant, perhaps elderborn, perhaps something that predates even that classification. His power signature matches nothing in our databases because he operates from a completely alien metaphysical framework. He activated a projection crystal, displaying recorded fragments from scrying attempts. The images were corrupted, distorted, but recognizable. Kratos encountering a group of lesser demons made like demonic ruins. The demons, sensing what they mistook for kindred power, approached in supplication. Their leader spoke in the infernal tongue, offering alliance, offering service. Kratos' response was wordless. A single strike that didn't merely kill the demons, but erased them from the fabric of reality. No corpses remain. No demonic essence returned to the infernal planes. They simply ceased, as if they had never existed. The other demons, those ancient enough to recognize true extinction, fled screaming into the abyss. A Zarosian archaeological outpost at the ancient prison, where researchers were attempting to decode pre-God Wars hieroglyphics. Kratos entered seeking information, his questions direct. Where are your gods? Where do they hide? When the researchers explained the concept of divine banishment, of gods existing beyond mortal reach in higher planes, his rage manifested physically. The blaze of chaos tore through reality itself, creating rifts that exposed the space between dimensions. Raw chaos that should have existed only in theoretical mathematics. The outpost's protective wards, powered by fragments of Zaros's own shadow, shattered. 17 researchers died. 3 survived by fleeing into the tunnels, their minds permanently scarred by glimpsing the nothing that existed where Kratos' weapons carved reality. The Temple Knight's fortress at the monastery, where Saradomin's most devoted warriors train in divine combat. Kratos appeared seeking the strongest among you. When directed to the training grounds, he issued a challenge that transcended language, a primal demand for combat, and every warrior instinctively understood. 20 knights accepted, activating every prayer simultaneously. Protection from melee, protection from magic, protection from missiles, piety to enhance their divine connection. The head abbot channeled Saradomin's power directly through the altar, creating a field of such concentrated holy energy that demons would have been instantly obliterated. Kratos walked into the field, and it parted around him. Not repelled, but simply refusing to acknowledge his existence. The battle lasted 9 minutes. No knight survived. Their prayer books spontaneously combusted in their inventories. The monastery's altar, a sacred site for 3,000 years, cracked down the middle. Its divine connection severed so completely that prayers spoken there now echoed into empty void. The projections ended. The chamber sat in silence, each faction processing the theological implications. Jessica, Void Knight Commander, spoke with the measured precision of someone trained to think in absolutes. We have been operating under a fundamental misconception. We believed the cosmological structure of Gielinor represented universal law, that the gods, the elder gods, the fundamental forces of order and chaos, represented the boundaries of possible existence. This entity proves we were wrong. He gestured to a complex diagram hovering above the table, showing Gielinor's metaphysical architecture. The mortal plane at the center, the divine realms above, the infernal planes below, all connected by the world gate and various dimensional bridges. The Void Knights existed at the edge of the structure, guarding against threats from beyond the known universe. He doesn't exist within this framework. He exists perpendicular to it. When our reality attempts to interact with him, he encounters something he cannot process, a being whose fundamental nature is rejection of cosmic hierarchy. He doesn't wield anti-divine power. He is anti-divine power incarnate. High Priest Race First composure cracked. That's heresy. You're suggesting that Saradomin, the god of order, the architect of civilization, is somehow incomplete, that his divine authority is not absolute. I'm suggesting, Jessica continued, that we have encountered something our gods cannot categorize, and if they cannot categorize it, they cannot combat it. The protection prayers fail because prayer requires divine acknowledgement, a god recognizing a supplicant and granting power. This entity does not acknowledge gods. Therefore, the entire prayer system becomes meaningless in his presence. Avdanakos interjected, his ancient voice carrying dark amusement. The Zoroastrian text calls such beings unmakers, entities whose very existence contradicts established reality. They are not destroyers who tear down what exists. They are negators who make existence retroactively impossible. When he kills, the killed are not merely dead, but philosophically unmade. Their prayer points don't drain. The concept of prayer points ceases to function near him. This is absurd, Racefer insisted, though his voice carried less certainty. If such beings existed, why haven't we encountered them before? Why would the other gods, who shape the universe itself, not prepare for such threats? Perhaps they did. The new voice came from the chamber's fourth entrance, one that should have been sealed. The wise old man entered, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who had lived long enough to recognize when the rules had changed. Perhaps the entire structure of Gielinor, the gods, the players, the balance between order and chaos, was designed as a containment system against exactly this type of entity. And perhaps it has just failed. He placed a collection of artifacts on the table, fragments from god weapons corrupted by contact with the Kratos, soil samples from his impact crater that showed impossible atomic configurations, even a scrap of cloth that had briefly touched his skin before spontaneously combusting. Each artifact radiated wrongness so profound that the chamber stabilization enchantments flickered. I've analyzed the energy signature. It is not foreign magic. It is foreign existence. Imagine a color that exists outside the visible spectrum, a sound at frequencies life cannot process. Now imagine that applied to metaphysical categories. He's a being from a reality where gods are not eternal, where divinity can be killed, where cosmic law is not absolute, but merely very strong suggestion. Commander Karasi stood abruptly. Then we cannot fight him. Every tactic we possess assumes divine support, assumes that enough prayer points and blessed weapons will overcome any threat. Against this, we are defenseless. Not defenseless, Avdanakos corrected, outmatched. There's a difference. He is not invincible, he simply operates from rules we do not understand. The Majorad have survived by adapting to changing cosmic paradigms. We survived Zoroastria's banishment. We survived the God Wars. We will survive this. How? Racefer demanded. How do you fight something that unmakes divinity itself? The Majorat's smile was predatory. You don't fight it. You redirect it. The chamber's attention focused. Akthanikos activated another projection. The one showing a map of Gielinor with marked locations. The Calphite Hive, the Queen Black Dragon's lair, the God Wars dungeon, the Zara city beneath Karamja. The creature seeks worthy opponents. Every engagement shows him responding to perceived strength with escalating violence. He is not mindlessly destructive. He is selectively annihilative. He destroys gods and god-adjacent entities because they represent what he opposes: unchallenged authority, claimed invincibility, cosmic hierarchy. You want to weaponize him, Jessica observed, her voice neutral. I want to survive him, Akthanikos corrected. If we cannot contain or destroy this entity, then we must ensure he destroys our enemies first. The wilderness is filled with remnants, godly artifacts, corrupted temples, avatar manifestations, with weak information suggesting their greater divine powers exist in specific locations. We allow him to believe that by destroying these targets, he is accomplishing his apparent goal. That's using a demon to fight demons. Racefer protested. No, the wise old man interjected quietly. That's using a god killer to kill god-adjacent threats, while we determine what actually can stop him. Because make no mistake, eventually he'll run out of gods to kill, and then he will notice us. The philosophical weight of their situation settled across the chamber like grave dirt. For 3,000 years, Gielinor's conflicts had occurred within understood parameters. Zamorak fought Saradormin, but both acknowledged the fundamental rules. The elder gods might reshape reality, but they did so according to their nature. Even Gothix's dream of balance assumed a framework where balance was possible. Kratos represented the collapse of that framework, proof that the cosmic order they had built civilizations upon was not universal law, but regional custom, and customs could be violated by those who never agreed to them. We need to understand what he wants, Karasi said finally. Every intelligence wants something. Even demons have desires we can exploit. What does he desire? The wise old man's response was immediate. Peace. He wants peace. But not the peace of balance or harmony. The peace of absolute silence. The peace that comes when every god is dead, every cosmic authority is shattered, when nothing remains that can impose its will upon existence. That's nihilism, Racefer breathed. That's victory, Akthanikos countered. In his framework, he has fought gods before. We see it in how efficiently he kills divinity. This is not his first pantheon. He has done this repeatedly, across realities we cannot imagine, and he has won every time. Jessica accessed her Void Knight archives, pulling records from the organization's founding documents. The Void Knights were established to guard against threats from beyond known reality. Our founders theorized such threats might exist. Being so alien that standard combat doctrine would be meaningless, they established protocols. She displayed a document written in ancient script, its language predating modern common. Protocol Omega. When encountering a threat that nullifies divine protection, do not engage directly. Do not attempt containment. Do not assume conventional victory is possible. Instead, delay, observe, and pray that the threat's goals do not include total annihilation. Your founders believe such things could exist, the wise old man observed. Our founders fought in the God Wars. They witnessed elder god manifestations. They understood that the universe was vaster and stranger than comfortable theology admitted. Jessica's voice carried something almost like respect for the entity that had shattered their reality. They knew, someday, Something would arrive that proved the gods were not apex predators, but simply very successful survivors. They were right. The council fell into strategic planning, their theological debates giving way to cold, tactical calculation. They would leak information through adventure networks, rumors of great beasts in the east, of divine artifacts awaiting challengers, of god avatars manifesting in remote locations. They would set up monitoring stations at safe distances, attempting to analyze Kratos' patterns, his apparent limitations, his ultimate objectives. They would not try to fight him. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. But as the delegates prepared to depart, as portals opened to return them to their respective factions, a message arrived that shattered their fragile plan. A runner burst into the chamber, his face pale, his prayer book smoking in his hands. The Queen Black Dragon is awakening. Something has breached the upper levels of Godworm Lair. The seismic reading suggests deliberate approach. The ground-level defenders report a single figure walking toward her sanctum. He's not attempting stealth, the runner's voice broke. He's calling her out. The Godworm Lair existed as one of Gielinor's carefully maintained impossibilities, a subterranean ecosystem, a reality bent under the weight of accumulated draconic essence. The Queen Black Dragon had slumbered there for millennia, her presence so metaphysically dense that the cavern existed simultaneously in multiple dimensional states. Adventurers who challenged her required not just combat prowess, but conceptual fortitude, the mental strength to function in spaces where causality became negotiable. The lair's entrance was monitored by a rotating guard of dragon slayers, their equipment optimized through generations of trial and fatal error. Extended anti-fire potions, dragonfire shields enhanced with dragonkin magic, prayer point reserves sufficient to maintain protection from magic for extended durations. They had developed protocols for every known threat, from the growlworms that burrowed through solid rock to the occasionally awakened dragon that erupted from the depths seeking prey. They had no protocol for Kratos. He arrived at the lair entrance at the sunset, his approach detected by seismic monitoring stations 3 kilometers out. The measurements made no sense. A single humanoid figure registering impact force equivalent to a collapsing mountain with each step. The Dragon Slayer captain, a veteran named Kratos, who had personally slain 17 black dragons, ordered standard challenge protocols. Halt and identify yourself. This area is under quarantine by order of... Kratos walked past her mid-sentence, not aggressively, not hurriedly, simply walked past, as if her authority was a sound happening in another room, relevant to his purpose. His eyes remained fixed on the lair entrance, on the darkness that pulsed with draconic power. Corodel's hand moved to her anti-dragon shield instinctively. I said, halt. The Queen Black Dragon is not a trophy for... She is not a trophy. Kratos' voice emerged like grinding stone. She is a test. For gods have hidden behind dragons, then dragons will burn. He descended into the darkness before Cordell could respond. She stood paralyzed, not by fear, but by the sudden, visceral understanding that she had just witnessed something categorically wrong, a violation of natural law so profound that her mind struggled to integrate it. Her prayer points began draining despite no prayers being active, leached by mere proximity to whatever wrongness had just passed. The monitoring station at Brimhaven received the seismic readings 17 seconds later. The pattern was impossible. A single entity descending through 3 levels of Godworms without deviation, without combat, without slowing. The Godworms, massive creatures that consumed rock and metal, were simply absent from his path, not killed, not avoided, absent, as if they had decided at some instinctual level that existing in his vicinity was incompatible with survival. Deep in the convergence chamber, the assembled council watched through scrying crystals as Kratos descended. The crystals flickered constantly, their enchantments struggling against the metaphysical distortion his presence created. Aptanakos leaned forward, his ancient features light with concentration. He's not searching. He knows exactly where he's going, as if he can sense divine power like blood in water. The Queen Black Dragon isn't divine, Commander Karasi objected. She's a creation of the Dragonkin, powerful, but mortal in the technical sense. She's dragon adjacent to godhood, the wise old man corrected. The Dragonkin were created by the Elder Gods. The dragons they birthed carry fragments of that primordial power. To an entity like Kratos, whose entire existence is defined by god-slaying, she would register as divine enough. On a crystal display, Kratos reached the 4th level, the royal grotworm breeding chambers, where the largest specimens gestated in pools of concentrated magic. They sensed his approach and attacked on instinct, their mandibles capable of crushing rune plate armor, their bodies wrapped in protective chitin that had evolved to resist dragonfire. Kratos did not so. The blades of chaos carved through chitin, through magical resistance, to their godward's fundamental biological imperative to survive. Their corpses dissolved into ash so fine it became indistinguishable from the cavern dust. The breeding pools boiled, their magical essence rejecting the presence that walked among them. He's accelerating, Jessica observed, not in speed, but in intensity. The energy readings are spiking exponentially. High Priest Racefer watched with growing horror as Kratos descended past the Godrealm Queen's chamber, past what should have been the deepest accessible level, and into spaces that existed on maps only as theoretical constructs. The ancient Zoroastrian tunnels, sealed since the Third Age, the dragon agripositories, forbidden even to dragon slayers, the approach to the Queen's true sanctum, where reality became so saturated with draconic essence that mortal minds would fracture from exposure. In that sanctum, the Queen Black Dragon stirred from slumber that had lasted 3 centuries. Her consciousness, vast and alien, touched the opposing presence and recoiled in confusion. She had encountered gods before. Gothix himself had acknowledged her existence, neither ally nor enemy, but simply too powerful to dismiss. The other gods had designed her progenitors as weapons against cosmic threats. But this approaching presence was not a cosmic threat. It was an anti-cosmic certainty, a walking declaration that the cosmos itself was negotiable. She rose, her scales scraping against cavern walls that existed partially in the Shadow Realm, her breath already igniting with dragonfire, hot enough to melt rune ore in seconds. 6 wings unfolded across dimensions, each one capable of generating hurricane-force winds. Her tail, long enough to wrap around the Grand Exchange 3 times, coiled in preparation for combat. The Queen Black Dragon had never retreated from battle. Her kind did not know fear in the way mortals understood it. But as Kratos entered her sanctum, as his eyes met hers across an impossible distance, something ancient in her consciousness whispered a truth she had never before considered. Some battles end not in victory or defeat, but in category error. Kratos stopped at the center of her sanctum, surrounded by pools of molten dragonfire, by artifacts worth kingdoms that she had collected over millennia. The blades of chaos hung loose in his hands, their chains rattling softly. When he spoke, his voice carried across dimensional barriers, resonating in frequencies that the Queen understood on levels beyond language. I have killed dragons that dreamed themselves gods. I have burned the wings of those who claim divine flight. You will tell me, where do your gods hide? Where do those who made you sleep in fear? The Queen Black Dragon's response came not in words, but in pure draconic fury. A roar that collapsed 3 adjacent caverns, that shattered scrying crystals across Gielinor, that made the Dragonkin themselves pause in their eternal torment. She unleashed her full arsenal simultaneously. Superheated dragonfire that could unmake magical protections, crystalline projectiles that phase-shifted between dimensions, a breath attack that targeted the soul rather than the body. Kratos raised the Leviathan axe. The frost weapon, forged in a realm of eternal winter by hands that had killed pantheons, met dragonfire and something broke. Not the weapon, not even the fire. Reality itself fractured. A clean geometric split where the fire met frost, where heat met absolute cold, where draconic essence met negation made physical. The fracture expanded. The Queen's dragonfire didn't extinguish, it ceased to have ever existed. The magical framework that sustained it, the complex interplay of draconic biology, magical channeling, and elder god design simply terminated. Prayer points across Gielinor flickered as the fundamental connection between cause and effect suffered localized failure. The Queen reeled, her 6 wings beating in disoriented fury. She had been wounded before. Dragon Slayers had scored minor victories over centuries. But this was not wounding. This was conceptual damage. Harm inflicted not on her body, but on the category of dragon itself. She descended from her perch, her massive form moving with grace that bettered her size, and attacked with claws that could rend adamant armor. Kratos met her with Spartan rage, and the sanctum witnessed true cataclysm. The rage was not anger in any emotional sense. It was metaphysical repudiation made manifest. A feel of negation so intense that it physically pushed against the walls of reality. Kratos' skin erupted with energy that wasn't divine power, but its perfect inverse. Anti-grace, unblessing, the cosmic middle finger given physical form. He tore open the ground himself, not with tools, but with will, with the same fundamental rejection that had let him kill gods with mortal hands. The cavern floor split along possible angles, revealing not the layers below, but the space between layers, the conceptual gap where Gielinor's reality met the void that predated creation. The Queen Black Dragon, witnessing this violation of natural law, felt something she had never experienced: existential doubt. Her existence was predicated on being Apex, the culmination of elder god engineering, the ultimate expression of draconic power. But this being before her suggested that Apex was merely local, that power was only authority until someone refused to acknowledge it. She attacked with everything, summoning lesser dragons from adjacent dimensions, calling upon the tortured souls found in her lair, channeling power directly from the dragonkin curse that empowered her kind. The sanctum became a maelstrom of magical destruction, forces capable of ending kingdoms colliding in a space meant to contain them. Kratos walked through it all, where dragonfire struck him, diminished, its heat dropping from world-ending to merely fatal to merely uncomfortable. Where magical projectiles touched him, they forgot how to exist. The summoned dragons approached and then simply didn't. Not killed, but unmade. Their summoning retroactively failing, as if the spell had never been cast. The Leviathan axe rose, then fell. The strike did not target the Queen's body. It targeted the space she occupied. The conceptual framework of Dragon Sanctum, the metaphysical architecture that allowed such a creature to exist in defiance of natural law. The axe cleaved through dimensions, through the shadow realm where parts of her consciousness resided, through the prayer-sustaining matrices that supported her immortality. The Queen Black Dragon screamed, a sound that registered across all of Gielinor simultaneously. In Lumbridge, windows shattered. In Varrock, the palace foundations cracked. In the Wizard's Tower, every experimental enchantment failed at once. Across the game world, adventurers clutched their heads as the scream bypassed ears and struck directly at consciousness. And then, she died. Not the slow death of a slain dragon, where minutes passed as life drained from massive bodies. Instant cessation, as if she had been deleted from existence. Her body remained, but something fundamental had been removed. The corpse was not a dragon's body. It was meat shaped like a dragon, emptied of whatever metaphysical component had elevated it beyond simple biological matter. The death cry became an earthquake. The cavern collapsed, but not downward, outward, into dimensions that should not have been adjacent. The wilderness crater reshaped itself, the bedrock flowing like water, ancient ruins emerging from spaces that had been sealed since the First Age. The shockwave traveled along ley lines, destabilizing magic channels across half of Gielinor. In the wizard's tower, every active spell terminated simultaneously. Teleportation networks crashed. Enchanted items flickered and died. The Grand Exchange's price calculation matrices, maintained by computational magic, reset to zero, causing panic as merchants watched fortunes become meaningless numbers. The prayer point phenomenon was worst. Across Gielinor, every practitioner of divine magic felt their connection sever. Not drain, sever. The gods themselves went silent for precisely 1 hour, their voices absent from prayers, their blessings unavailable, their protection prayers returning empty void. Temples fell silent, altars went cold, priests experienced what atheists always claimed: the vast, terrifying absence where God should be. In the convergence chamber, the scrying crystals exploded. The council sat in smoking darkness, each member processing what they had witnessed. Finally, Agthanico spoke, his voice carrying millennia of experience with cosmic catastrophe. The Queen-backed dragon was a cornerstone entity. Her existence stabilized probability matrices across the eastern territories. Without her, chaos theory suggests cascading failures in magical infrastructure for months, perhaps years. He didn't just kill her, the wise old man added quietly. He invalidated her, made her impossible. The metaphysical space she occupied is now permanently damaged. No dragon of equivalent power can manifest there. He didn't conquer that territory. He poisoned it against divinity itself. Commander Karasi's voice was hollow. The prayer point severance, that wasn't collateral damage. That was a message. He was showing us that divine protection is not invincible. It's not even reliable. It's conditional on gods choosing to respond. And for 1 hour, our gods chose silence over confronting what walks in the wilderness. High Priest Racefer said nothing. His worldview, built on the absolute authority of divine order, had died along with the dragon. The silence from Shire Doman was not absence, but strategic retreat, proof that even gods recognize threats too fundamental to engage. Jessica accessed damage reports flooding into Void Knight Command. 14 major ley line intersections corrupted. The abyss has destabilized. Dimensional barriers are hemorrhaging. We're detecting breach attempts from entities that have been safely contained since the God Wars. The metaphysical equilibrium is failing. Because he doesn't care about equilibrium, the wise old man said. Balance implies he's part of the system. He's not. He's the rock thrown through the window. He doesn't negotiate with glass. He simply passes through and lets the pieces fall where they may. A new report arrived via emergency courier. Kratos had been sighted walking out of the collapsed lair, his armor barely scratched, the blades of chaos still smoldering with dragon blood that turned blue. He walked north, toward the heart of the wilderness, toward areas that had been forbidden since the Zamorakian corruption, toward the places where gods had hidden their most dangerous secrets. The ruins of the Queen-Blood Dragon Sanctum smoldered with fires that defied natural law, flames that burned without fuel, sustained by the metaphysical trauma inflicted upon reality itself. Kratos stood at the crater's center, surrounded by debris that had once been priceless artifacts. Dragon scales that had survived millennia, now reduced to ash. Pools of what had been molten dragon fire, now crystallized into geometric patterns that hurt mortal eyes to perceive. His armor bore scorch marks, minor wounds that would have obliterated desert beings. But they were cozy, not healing in any biological sense, but refusing to remain. As if his body rejected the concept of permanent damage with the same intensity it rejected divine authority. The blades of chaos dripped with blood that turned blue and white. Dragon essence corrupted by contact with something it was never meant to touch. The Leviathan axe hummed softly, frost spreading across the heated ground in defiance of thermodynamics, creating patterns that resembled ancient Greek letters, words in a language Gielinor had ever known. Kratos looked across the devastation he had wrought, his expression unchanging. There was no satisfaction in his eyes, no pride, no regret, only the hollow certainty of someone who had performed this ritual too many times across too many worlds. His voice emerged barely above a whisper, but it carried across the ruined sanctum with absolute clarity. No gods, no masters, only peace bought in blood. He turned north, toward the heart of the wilderness, toward the dark energies pulsing from Zamorakian strongholds and Zoroastrian ruins, toward places where the gods had left fragments of their power, thinking them safely hidden. He walked with the same measured pace, neither hurrying nor hesitating, a force of nature given humanoid form. Behind him, the crater continued to collapse, not into the earth, but into itself, creating a dimensional sinkhole where the laws of physics became optional. Scrying attempts to monitor the area returned only static and geometric impossibilities. The space itself had been wounded. It would perhaps never fully heal. 3 kilometers away, hidden behind emergency teleportation wards, Corridal watched through a spyglass, enchanted to function across dimensional barriers. Her hands shook as she recorded observations in her journal. Observations that would later become classified documents, too dangerous for public knowledge. The entity displays no fatigue, no hesitation, no sign that slaying a cornerstone creature of Elder God design required effort beyond inconvenience. Most disturbing, he seemed disappointed, as if the Queen Black Dragon, for all her power, was not the talent she sought. He's searching for something greater, something that would require him to truly fight. The implications terrify me. If dragons are mere obstacles, if God-touched entities are warm-ups, who does he consider a worthy opponent? What level of divine power must manifest before he experiences genuine threat? I fear we will discover the answer, and I fear that discovery will end us. The emergency convocation reconvened 18 hours later, in a location even more secure than the convergence chamber, the undercrypt of Falador, a space that existed simultaneously in 3 time periods through carefully maintained chronomancy. The room was lined with texts dating back to the First Age, when gods walked openly among mortals and the fundamental laws of Gielinor were still being negotiated. The surviving authorities arrived separately, each taking circuitous routes through teleportation networks that no longer function reliably. The death of the Queen Black Dragon had destabilized more than magic. It had destabilized certainty itself. Prayer no longer felt like communion with the divine, but rather like shouting into an abyss that might answer if it felt like it. High Priest Racefer entered last, his ceremonial robes replaced by simple cloth. The transformation was symbolic. He had shed the trappings of divine authority because divine authority had proven conditional. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its former certainty. The theological implications are complete. Not catastrophic, complete. The framework we built our entire civilization upon has been proven false. Not wrong, but incomplete. We believe gods represented absolute power. We believe prayer created unbreakable connections. We believe that sufficient faith could overcome any threats. He placed a stack of reports on the obsidian table. Each document represented another failure, another prayer that went unanswered, another divine protection that had failed. The Temple Knights had lost 37 members attempting to establish a defensive perimeter around Kratos' projected path. Not because they fought him, he had walked past them as if they were scenery, but because mere proximity to his presence caused prayer books to spontaneously combust, best weapons to corrupt, divine enchantments to unravel. Our gods are afraid, Racefer continued. Sardomin has gone silent. Zamorar's chaotic whispers have ceased. Even Guthix's passive balance no longer maintains equilibrium. For the first time since the Elder Gods departed, we face an entity their deities refused to confront directly. Commander Karasi added her tactical assessment. We have documented 47 engagement attempts across various factions: Sir Dominus Paladins, Zamorakian Chaos Mages, Gothixian Druids, even Armadel's Aranci Warriors. The results are uniform: complete failure. Not defeat in combat, failure of the fundamental assumptions that make combat possible. Prayers don't work, divine weapons don't work, magic blessed by gods becomes mundane or corrupts. He is an anti-divine zone made ambulatory. Ektonikos, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. The Majorat have existed for millennia by understanding power dynamics. We survived the collapse of Zoroastria's empire, the death of Gothics, the machinations of other gods. We survive because we adapt, because we understand that power is contextual, and contextual power can be manipulated. He paused, his ancient features tight with something approaching despair. This entity represents power that is not contextual. It is absolute in its specific domain, the negation of divine authority. He does not fight gods using different divine power. He fights them using mortal defiance elevated to metaphysical principle. And the terrifying implication is that mortal defiance, when pursued with sufficient will, can unmake even other god creations. The wise old man had spent the intervening hours analyzing every available data point, cross-referencing ancient texts with observed phenomena. His conclusion was recorded in a document that would become known as the Falador Confession, an ecclesiastical admission that would be sealed in the royal archives, forbidden knowledge too dangerous for public consciousness. We have encountered proof that the cosmological order of Gielinor is not universal law, but regional custom. The gods we worship, the other gods have shaped reality, the fundamental forces that govern existence, all operate within a framework that we mistakenly believed was absolute. This entity called Kratos exists outside that framework. He carries with him the metaphysical possibility of a reality where gods can die, where divine power is not eternal, where worship is not binding contract, but voluntary delusion. His very presence corrodes our reality's fundamental assumptions. Analysis of his power signature reveals something unprecedented. He does not draw energy from external sources. No ley lines, no prayer, no demonic pacts, no elder god residue. His power is eternal, self-sustaining, rooted in pure rejection. He says no to reality, and reality bends. The mechanism appears to be philosophical rather than magical. Gods exist because mortals believe they're unchallengeable. Divine power functions because both God and mortal accept its supremacy. Kratos operates from a framework where nothing is unchallengeable, where power is simply force applied with sufficient will, where the only difference between mortal and divine is that gods have forgotten they can die. And he remembers. He carries that memory like a weapon. When he looks at gods, he sees not eternal beings, but merely very powerful entities who have convinced themselves of their own immortality. And that conviction shatters under his gaze. Jessica presented the Void Knight's final assessment. You have developed 3 theoretical approaches. All have been deemed non-viable. She displayed 3 holograms showing complex tactical scenarios. Approach 1. Containment. We construct a metaphysical prison using elder god artifacts, channeling enough divine power to create an inescapable space. Problem? His presence corrupts divine artifacts. The prison will collapse faster than we could build it. Approach 2. Redirection. We manipulate his apparent quest to find and destroy gods, leading him to targets that serve our strategic interests. Problem. He is not mindlessly destructive. Evidence suggests he can distinguish between genuine divine threats and diversions. He will not be used. Approach 3. Appeasement. We offer him what he seeks, direct confrontation with our gods. Allow him to challenge Sardomin, Zamorak, or even attempt to wake the elder gods. Problem. If he wins, we lose our gods. If he loses, he has proven killable, and we learn nothing. If the battle is inconclusive, the collateral damage would end civilization. There is no fourth approach. The silence that followed carried the weight of civilizational surrender. For the first time in recorded history, Gielinor's authorities had encountered a problem they could not solve, could not contain, could not even adequately understand. The very tools they would use to analyze him, magic, prayer, divine scrying, were the tools he negated. High Priest Racefer stood slowly, his movements those of someone who had aged decades in days. Then we document, we record everything we know, seated in the deepest archives, and pray, though prayer now feels hollow, that he leaves of his own accord, that whatever he seeks in Gielinor, he finds or fails to find, and moves on to another world. And if he doesn't leave, Commander Krasi asked, then Gielinor will have to decide whether it wishes to survive as it is or burn with its gods. The wise old man added the final observation, the thought that would haunt every subsequent theological discussion. He said, the gods remain. Not your gods, not these gods, the gods. As if divinity itself offends him, as if every pantheon, every cosmic hierarchy, every entity that claims eternal authority triggers the same response, absolute negation. He has done this before. The efficiency of his godslay, the tactical precision, the complete absence of hesitation. These are not the actions of someone encountering divinity for the first time. He has killed gods, multiple pantheons, across realities we cannot imagine, and he has won every time. Akthanakos' laugh was bitter. Then we are witnessing the end of an era, not because our gods will die. Perhaps they won't. Perhaps they're powerful enough to survive him. But because we now know they can die. That knowledge alone is fail to faith. How do you worship what you know is killable? How do you build civilization on divine mandate when divine mandate has been proven conditional? The council dispersed without formal adjournment, each member returning to their factions to deliver news that cannot be adequately conveyed. The words still turned, the sun still rose, but the metaphysical foundation beneath it all had cracked. Gielinor would endure. Its cities, its people, its landscapes would continue, but something fundamental had died. Faith died, not belief, but certainty. The absolute conviction that gods were eternal, that prayer was binding, that divine authority represented ultimate power. That certainty had been murdered by a single mortal who refused to accept it. In the weeks that followed, Kratos continued his path through the wilderness and beyond, leaving a trail of collapsed divine outposts, corrupt and gone artifacts in silent temples. He fought a manifested avatar of Bandos, reducing the war god's physical form to inert matter in 17 seconds. He destroyed a Zoroastrian pyramid that had stood since the Second Age, not through siege or demolition, but by walking through it while the structure's divine wards tore themselves apart trying to process his presence. The gods themselves remained silent, neither intervening nor acknowledging. This silence told the faithful everything they needed to know. Even deities recognized threats too fundamental to engage. Reports tracked Kratos moving north, then east, then simply vanishing from scrying attempts. Some claimed he had found what he sought and departed to another realm. Others believe he had ascended into spaces between dimensions, seeking other gods themselves. A few whispered that he had simply ceased bothering with Gielinor, finding its gods insufficiently challenging. But in the deepest archives, in documents sealed with enchantments that predated modern magic, the wise old man recorded a final observation. He will return. Perhaps not to Gielinor specifically, but to any reality where gods claim eternal authority. His existence is cyclical. He appears, destroying its divine certainty, and moves on, leaving worlds to rebuild their fates on honesty rather than absolute conviction. We are not his first crisis of faith. We will not be his last. Somewhere beyond the edges of our reality walks a man who killed our heavens, not through superior divinity, but through superior will. He proves that gods are powerful, yes, but not absolute. not eternal, not unchallengeable. And that proof, once introduced, can never be forgotten. If ever he returns, Gielinor will have to decide whether it wishes to survive as it is, clinging to a comfortable lie of divine invincibility, or transform into something harder and truer. A world that worships, not because gods are unchallengeable, but because they choose to worship anyway. That is the gift and curse he has given us, the freedom to say no to gods, and the terrifying responsibility that comes with such freedom. The document was sealed, the archives locked, and across Gielinor, in temples and churches and sacred groves, prayers continued. But they sounded different now, quieter, more tentative, as like commands issued to servants, and more like requests offered to very powerful beings who might someday meet something even they could not overcome. The world endured, but faith, as it had been understood for millennia, had died. And in that death, something new, uncertain, frightening, but perhaps even more honest, was born.